It seems everywhere we turn, we hear of the problem of teen sexual activity. We read about it in almost every newspaper. We hear about it on the evening television programs and on public radio. But what is being done to address this problem? What are the approaches that our public school systems are employing? Are they having any positive effects, or are they aggravating the problem? Well, the Church, which has been called the expert in humanity by Paul VI, has addressed the problem through its Pontifical Council for the Family and has issued a new document on the truth and meaning of human sexuality, a document that we will discuss in this episode of the St. Charles Forum.
The Eternal Word Television Network presents the St. Charles Forum from St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Welcome to St. Charles Forum as we discuss a new document coming out of the Holy See to enable families to instruct their children on marriage and family, preparing them for marriage and family. And we have three individuals who are very much involved in this kind of education. Immediately on my left, we have Brenda Hux, who's the Executive Director of Family Honor. Brenda, very happy to have you with us. Father Richard Hogan, who has written 2 books on the thought of Pope John Paul II and also is involved in a project known as Project Genesis. Right. Very happy to have you with us, Father Hogan.
Thank you.
And Colleen Kelly Mast, who has written a series known as Love and Life. And we're very happy to have Colleen with us.
Great to be here, Jeff.
In fact, Colleen was in Rome as this document was being prepared, were you not?
Right, it was very exciting just to be invited there and then to see the background and to hear the expertise that came behind the document was a wonderful opportunity, particularly for somebody from this country.
Now, you were invited because you had developed this series called Love and Life, is that right?
Right.
So you were sort of an expert witness.
Well, that's what they did. They wanted to invite experts. They said it was a small meeting of experts from around the world that were going to discuss and study in depth the document so that we would bring it back. And they knew they could trust the people that they brought. We weren't going to mutilate it when we got back, so that we would bring it back to our people and get this right to parents to whom the document is written.
Okay, now the Holy See wouldn't have even gone to this trouble were it not for the fact that there's a very grave problem out there right now. I mean, we just see some of the dreadful social consequences of teen sexual activity. The illegitimacy rate right now in this country, Father, do you happen to have the figures on that?
Well, approximately. I think it's about 27% among whites, and then it's over 60% among blacks. But
of the children born in this country being born out of wedlock.
Out of wedlock.
So this is a grave problem and great social cost.
And it's not just in this country, of course. We tend to look at our own country, obviously, because we're familiar with it, we live here. But Western Europe is in a critical situation, Germany, France, Italy as well. And then, of course, since the fall of the communist regime, where you have greater freedoms now, there is a great danger, not only in the formerly Eastern Bloc countries, but even in Russia, because the freedoms political freedoms have led to some sexual license. So this is, the Holy See is looking at this as a worldwide problem.
But it's a big problem right here in our own country.
Of course,
and
it
of course,
is.
Many people have tried to address this. I mean, from private agencies to governments. I mean, even Planned Parenthood sees this as a problem, right? And have tried to address it. How successful have been the generally tried programs in this country?
I think we can call them a dismal failure at this point. I think any way you cut it, if you're looking at not even just the teen pregnancy rate, but certainly the abortion rate, sexually transmitted diseases. I think a lot of the focus has been on AIDS, but there's a whole host of other diseases out there, chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes, that are really turning the sexuality upside down.
But we know, though, that millions of government dollars have been spent on this.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, too, I think the more, what we are hearing is the more money that is spent on the so-called teen pregnancy prevention programs or family planning programs, it exacerbates the problem the worse it gets. We have statistics at our office that show from a period of, I think it was 1971 to 1981, when there was an enormous increase in spending for so-called family planning programs, which is kind of a misnomer because this is for unmarried teenagers. It's unbelievable these terms are used, that there was something like a 306% increase in teen pregnancies in the country. And the solution seems to be, well, okay, that didn't work, so what we need is more money for more programs. It's incredible. The logic, it defies logic, really.
And Colleen, this is what you found in your studies as well. I mean, there's an increase in teen sexual activity because of most of these programs.
Definitely.
Right?
We're focusing on a symptom. We think that teenage pregnancy is a problem, and that is only a symptom of the problem. The problem is we do not understand as a culture the truth and meaning of human sexuality, and that it takes away meaning from our lives, meaning to the marital act, meaning to marriages itself.
I'd like to pick up on what you just said, because those weren't words that just accidentally tripped off your tongue. When you said we don't know the truth and meaning of human sexuality, what's the title of this document that the Holy See has just issued?
That is the title of the document, and that's why the Holy See responded. We don't understand the truth and meaning, so they need to present to us again. This is what the truth and meaning of human sexuality. And as the church responds as the light of Christ and says, you're going down the dark path there, guys. We're turning on the light for you. You're trying to do this in a secularized form. You think sexual information, you think trying to treat the symptom of pregnancy is going to solve your problem, and it's not working, it's not going to do it. We're trying to let you see this as Christ sees this from above. We're going to give you new meaning to this and give this back to the home, give this back to the families, and build a civilization of love.
I think Colleen's right. We've been more or less on information overload, but it's information that is removed from everything else. Information removed from church teaching, information really removed from any kind of moral base, and that has not been good, to say the least.
Yeah, well, those of us who have children have had to deal with that, because it doesn't matter what school they go to, frankly. In all honesty, I mean, Catholic or public schools, it's information overload. Yeah. I mean, they're coming back with all these terms of sexuality and so forth, and they don't even know what some of them mean. Or they can't even comprehend what some of them mean, even if they're told.
Yeah, as you just said, it's information that is strictly speaking biological or about the body. And the worst thing that can happen to a teenager is to become pregnant. And I suppose for the boys to become a father, although it doesn't seem to be as much of an issue. People don't talk about that. But that isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is what the document calls the trivialization of sexuality. And I think that in our culture and society, people are seeing this. We've had enough abortions, for example, 33 million since 1973. We've had enough of the harm done to teenagers and the whole of society, because we don't understand what this sexual act is.
Well, is that
it's a spiritual act, you know.
Okay. So all three of you are saying that the reason these other programs haven't worked is because they don't understand what sex is.
No, they don't understand that it is a physical act that expresses something much deeper. And all they look at is the physical act, the biological event. There's a lot more here.
But it's been going on long enough.
Yeah, when that's not right, then it's a harm to the spiritual. There's no moral base. And the harm to the spiritual person, to the inward person, is real far greater than the harm to the body.
But the church sees not just the spiritual, but the harm to the person, we're seeing the consequences of now. The emotional, the psychological harm, the kids turning to drinking and drugs, the emptiness, the despair, the suicide. They have performed an act that they thought was just something trivial. They gave their whole self, and they're crushed, and they break down their ability to be intimate. I describe it to teenagers as if there was a piece of duct tape on their arm and we rip it off. You know, it's like what that sexual bonding is.
And I think
painful. It hurts.
We can destroy our ability to be close to people and develop relationship. So we've practiced this act. We don't know what a relationship is, so everything we believe, becomes meaningless from then on, and we trivialize again marriage, family, childbearing, and
Colleen,
it's an empty
I think
life.
it might have been your organization, or not another one of the pro-family organizations, that has a short but just very meaningful saying, condoms don't protect the heart. And that just, I think, is a good summary of some of what we're talking about too, that there's more than just the physical being destroyed, that the emotional, the psyche of these young people, that the whole bonding aspect has been totally ripped apart. There's no question.
Since Father talked about the spiritual, you talked about the emotional, you earlier talked about the physical in terms of all the venereal diseases diseases that you ticked off, not the least of which, of course, is AIDS that we have to deal with today. So it's been a failure. It's just been a devastating failure.
Yeah.
Just information without understanding the human person and the value that this act has is useless.
So the Holy See wants to now tell us the meaning of the data. I mean, the data's out there. Anybody can read a biology book and learn the data, right? And so that's the purpose of this document. But if the Holy See wants to turn the situation around, where does it see the solution residing?
Well, they said parents have lost their confidence. The parents, sometimes willingly, because they're so busy, have given up this duty to schools, even to the church, and they found that this is not what's helping children. It again trivializes sex. Then sex isn't part of a relationship as it is within the family. That little moment between mother and daughter on the edge of the bed, or the questions when the kid comes home from the playground, Mommy, what does this mean? And all those types of questions. When you do your human sexuality education within the intimacy of the family, you teach, this belongs in the family, we have the answers here in the family, and this is about family.
So is that what this document is saying? It is saying that this kind of education belongs in the family.
Right.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
And let's give the
question.
parents the confidence to do it because they have the grace to do it through the sacrament of matrimony.
So to whom is this document principally directed?
It's directed to parents. And when I was at the Vatican, they mentioned how the Pontifical Council and many of the councils of the church generally direct documents to other commissions or bishops and dioceses. And this is written directly to parents. So it is our responsibility as leaders in the movement to see that this gets right to parents so they can benefit from it, and for churches and parishes to educate parents so they can do their job well, because again, they have the grace to do it.
Well, I don't want to be indelicate here, but did the Holy See feel that there was a need to go directly to parents because there wasn't being handled well or properly maybe in some other areas, even in the church's life?
The document mentions that they've received, the Pontifical Council on the Family has received many letters requesting a statement from the highest authority in the church. People have written to them because they've been frustrated by... Parents have written to them, especially mothers, the document mentioned. They've been these mothers who've written have been frustrated with the programs that have been offered, and they wanted to know if they had any rights or authority. And so this document is a response to those requests that have been coming in apparently for years, and from the United States as well as I presume other countries, but certainly from here.
They mentioned that there were, as a matter of fact, during the 3-day meeting, I think Cardinal Trujillo mentioned 4 or 5 times, I don't mean to be picking on you, United States, but we're getting a lot of complaints from you.
Oh, that's interesting.
First of all, the rest of the cultures look to us for leadership through the media, unfortunately. And then they look to us, sometimes because we think we know a lot in our church. And when you see a global picture, you see how impoverished we are here sometimes.
Right. But you had mentioned Cardinal Trujillo and the Pontifical Council for the Family. Maybe we could just finish up this segment. Who is this Cardinal Trujillo?
Cardinal Trujillo is the president of the Pontifical Council for the Family. He's replaced Cardinal Gagnon, who was the first president of the Pontifical Council. And the
council's in Rome at the Holy See, is that right?
It's part of the government of the Church. Many people think the Vatican is just the Pope, but it's like our presidency, The president has his cabinet, and the Pontifical Council of the Family is one of the offices of the cabinet of the Vatican. There are 3 different kinds of cabinet offices: congregations, councils, and commissions.
Okay, and this council from the Vatican has issued this document.
Yeah,
and we're going to look at the document
family, yeah.
itself when we come back from this break.
The St. Charles Forum will continue in a moment.
Welcome back to our discussion of the Holy See's document, Truth and Meaning, helping us understand the true meaning of human sexuality. The Holy See has acknowledged this grave difficulty with illicit teen sexual activity, wants to address it. We've already seen that it's not being adequately addressed. But the document itself mentions some problems. I mean, some approaches that are taken to quote-unquote sex education that just don't work. For example, in the schools. I mean, it talks about it being done in the schools. What are some of the problems that are attendant upon that?
Oh, I think they're endless at this point. Age inappropriateness is a real biggie. I get calls all the time with parents talking about that. Information that is totally beyond kids' understanding or desire to know. I think that's one.
So if they're in the schools, that means you're in this grade and you get this in this grade.
Yeah,
like you get
predetermined with no thought to individual differences between children, and that is probably one of the biggest complaints from parents.
Okay, so everybody at a given age maybe learn the multiplication table, but you can't do that with
not
this
at all.
topic.
I think another one certainly is the lack of consideration and involvement that teachers very often give to parents in terms of incorporating them into any kind of planning for sex education programs, or letting them know what's going on, or even making material available to the parents. Very often parents have a hard time getting a hold of copies of what is being taught. I think those are two of the biggies.
Mm-hmm. And I know another one is mixed classes. I mean, where you have boys and girls together.
Right.
I mean, is there a problem with this,
A lot of the
Colleen?
classes are set up to desensitize children and break down their modesty. Besides the age inappropriateness that we have, then there are groups where, even at 7th and 8th grade, young kids are on different planets in terms of their maturity, and we expect them both to be in the same class and understand the same set of information while they're embarrassed a little bit. And then we tell them, oh, well, don't be embarrassed. That's a problem you have. Whereas that embarrassment was their natural modesty that was good. And
Yeah,
so
embarrassment is a sort of defense of
a
their
sign that they
chastity.
have purity still.
Mm-hmm. And the schools are trying to break that down.
Exactly, and that's a real problem, because they're told, the teachers and the parents are told, and these kids have to adjust and do this, and the adjustment that they have to make is that of impurity.
And then, of course, the document also mentions that what we were talking about before the break, and that was that this is just strictly information, just facts, without any moral base or any spiritual structure or value structure, I suppose we would say. The church absolutely insists, and has insisted for centuries, this isn't anything new, but the problem is more acute today, insists that any kind of education in sexuality be given with the moral norms of Christianity. We're talking about the commandments and the virtues, very basic stuff.
So you can't teach
you can't
about sex unless you're also teaching morality.
Right, and that's, of course, that's one of the major problems, even in programs in Catholic schools. There's no integration between the religion, if you will, and the sexuality programs.
Colleen, I know the document also mentioned this role-playing business.
Right, they talked about both open-ended role-playing, as a general problem where kids are to decide.
What is that? I mean, how is this used sometimes?
Kids act out a situation, that's non-directive. Then, how are we going to find this solution, rather than giving them a direction of this is what you should decide. And kids don't have the moral capability to be teaching one another if they've not received the morals themselves to start with, or if they're asked to clarify their values and the values clarification, sections. And they don't have the values, or they would be the teacher. And sometimes the teachers don't have the values. I know one class in a public school that teaches values clarification, they're told not to say that there are any morals. And children are so confused, or they're told that, you can have your own idea, or the church teaches this, but everybody's got to make up their own mind. Children become more confused in these types of classes than if they had general good catechesis on the 6th and 9th commandments.
Yeah.
And I think, too, in many situations, there is, if not a deliberate statement, then the inference that your parents' values don't have to be your values, number one, and number two, and I think a fair amount of the videos that are shown, too, I hear this complaint a lot, that parents are very often made to look goofy for the way they're putting across their information or perceived ineptness on it.
Can you tell us a little bit more, Brenda, about values clarification? I mean, what that is, what techniques are being used, and what the goals are that people use this?
Yeah, I guess in its most simplest form, and Colleen really alluded to this, it's more or less, there aren't necessarily any rights or wrongs. There's not necessarily a moral base that you draw from. You decide what's best for you.
So you're clarifying your own values.
You're clarifying your own values, really and truly. And that, of course, leads to some real problems in this particular area.
It's really a false notion of freedom. And it's the idea that we all can determine our own values, even to the point of determining reality. You know, the Creator made us a certain way, made the earth a certain way, and along with the fact of creation, just the fact that He made us, there's certain ways that we should act. And those are given. That's the standard traditional Christian view of things, whether it's Catholic or Lutheran or even Jewish. It's not just Christians. Jewish comes out of the Old Testament.
It's not a matter of clarifying your own vision of the world. It's discovering what the world is.
But see, this is a radical break with classical Judeo-Christian teaching, that I, in my own freedom, can determine what those values are. It's like you're playing God. It's a false notion of freedom.
You become the creator.
Well, that's what they're kind of saying. Of course, it's impossible because you can't do it. But
no, but they think
they try to.
Well, now this document is here to address these problems. Now, and it has said that this task is to be carried out within the family where it belongs. Now, if that's done, how does the family then address some of these problems? Let's say age appropriateness. How's that handled better, Colleen, in the family than in the school?
Well, only a parent knows when a child is ready for particular information, and this is addressed in the document, that there is a special relationship between parent and child. And if there isn't, the parent, it says, should be spending more time with the child to have that relationship and develop an intimacy and spend some time with your children, because only you know them. And when you have that relationship, those particular questions can come up, and you can answer them very gently at the time that it is needed to give them simple, truthful information in a gentle, gradual way, so it doesn't become just another subject. Well, we have math and reading and sex and science, and it becomes something, again, casual and just the next subject, rather than, well, this is a family thing, and I'm going to ask my mom this question because she knows it. So you can address that much better individually in a home, and you can see when problems are coming up or when sinful tendencies are arising. Your child isn't going to be perfect just because you sexually educate him in the home either. That you can see those things coming up, and you can do what the church asks you to do, and that is bring your faith to the culture rather than secularizing our sex education. That we can teach things in the home, like how to make sacrifices is what the document says. That's some of the basics. We need to learn to make sacrifices, to teach children to learn how to wait, self-discipline, family prayer, teach them all the other virtues. And with having taught those, when we introduce sexual information and sexual self-control, it's not strange to a life.
Part of an overall lifestyle.
Exactly.
You mean I can't have everything I want all at once?
No, that's one of the problems. We have kids that have everything they want. They have parents who think they, get everything they want. They get their own way. And then I can't have sex, So, so that is why the church is calling us way back to educating our children in a way that they are prepared for this information, because we prepare them with the other virtues first.
And I think also, building on what Colleen is saying too, the document very specifically talks about the natural bonding that takes place between the same-sex parent and child, that to build on that natural bond, that natural relationship in discussing this in a very delicate and appropriate way. It also acknowledges too where there are single-parent families where the parent of the opposite sex is raising the child. The document encourages that parent to find a mentor or a special trusted family member or friend that is the same sex as that child, so that, again, a natural relationship can develop in imparting this information in a very delicate way. And I think that's good that that acknowledgement is given, too.
And so the document makes it very clear that there's a divine intent that the educators of children in this are male and female.
Yes,
right.
Yes. And I think another beautiful thing that it talks about, too, is the complementarity of the sexes, which is very important, that male and female, he created them, and that there is beauty in both, that the male or the female does not have to try and be the other, that the complementarity is such an important aspect to the sexuality and the true meaning of sexuality.
Now, some of the language that you've been using will not sound unfamiliar to someone who has read the thought of Pope John Paul II. Now, Father, I know that you've written a couple of books on the Holy Father's thought. Do you see that expressed in this document?
Oh, yes, yes. One of the customary things that the Holy See does is in issuing any kind of a document at any kind of a level, if it's a letter from the Pope, or it's a document like this, or there are other levels of documents.
This was not written by the Pope.
No, this was
written
not by the council. By the council.
Okay,
this
but
is
nonetheless,
not. It's not. Yeah, it was approved by this organ of the Vatican. Yeah, it's a paper. It's issued by the Vatican, which classifies it as a papal document. But one of the things they always do is they quote previous writings, and they in this particular issue, because Pope John Paul II has written so much on sexuality in the family in his pontificate, and even before, you have quotes from other of his documents, particularly the Apostolic Exhortation on the Family, which was issued in 1983 after the Synod on the Family. A very, very long, extensive document on the family, the longest treatise that the Church has ever issued on the family. It's laced with this.
Are there any sort of distinctive John Paul II thoughts
very
that
distinctive,
appear here?
yes.
Well, give us a couple, so we can look for them when we read this document, which I hope everybody will do.
Well, there's first of all, he has what he calls the theology of the body. Now, this is a very large topic. He gave 127 addresses on it.
We don't have that much time.
No, but basically, it talks about the body as the way of expressing the person. It really, very simply, it's body language that was so popular a few years ago. That's all the Holy Father is really trying to say, but he's saying it in a very theological way, that the body expresses the person, that there's more to what you say or do or the sexual act than just bodily functions. It's the substratum of the person. And he uses the term, the body is the expression of the person.
And there are two fundamentally different kinds of bodies too, right?
Right, male and female, right. And they both express personhood equally, but differently, complementarily. It gets at the notion that is so prevalent in our culture, that there is, the body is a thing, something almost like exterior packaging. You know, the theme, it's my body, or I can do what I want with my body. Well, this is what the Holy Father is addressing in that.
Well, also, I find too in the schools, I know some schools purposely try to play down differentiation between the sexes, right? I mean, they come down hard on encouraging. They want to encourage boys to play with dolls and little girls to play with fire trucks. I mean, have you found that?
Some of the sex ed programs.
No question. Even to the extent of one of the big things right now that I've been hearing a lot about in some of the sex ed classes is they have this doll called Baby Think It Over, and it's a doll that you put a key in it, and it can make it cry at certain times, and the teen has to carry it around. And they have both boys and girls doing this, and there's a lot of instances. You're absolutely right in terms of the total interchangeability of roles,
which is absolutely contrary to creation. You know, it's again trying to redo what God did, and it's an attack on the individual level, attack on the person.
Yeah. And the Holy Father has tried to address this in his writing,
much, yeah.
And we find it in this document. And we're going to come back to a further discussion of this document after this break.
Stay tuned. The St. Charles Forum will return in just a moment.
Welcome back to our discussion of the truth and meaning of human sexuality, the Vatican's guidelines for parents on training their children for marriage and family. And Father Hogan was telling us about some of the particular thoughts of the Pope that are incorporated into this document. What are a couple of the others?
Well, I had mentioned the theology of the body. The other particular one that we see in here is his theology of the family, or theology of love. And as with everything he does, he starts with the idea that we're created in God's likeness, or his image. It's from Genesis. And if we're made like God, then we are called to act like him. And so what does God do? Well, Jesus revealed that. It's love, especially on the cross. But we love as God loves, or at least that's what we should do. And there's a very particular definition for John Paul of how God loves. And this is taken from the example of Christ. It's a choice. Well, we all know that. It's an act of the will. That's why the body is the expression of this act, of the choice. But the choice is based on the knowledge of the dignity of other human beings, because we're all images of God. So we recognize again the truth in someone else. And then we're attracted to that great value that God placed there when he created that individual. So it's a choice. It's based on knowledge. It's a self-gift, like Christ gave himself on the cross. And this self-gift is permanent, for all eternity, and life-giving, because Christ's act on the cross is permanent. He's always the Lamb of God. And it gave us life for the life of grace, the life of the sacraments.
That struck me though when I first read that phrase in the document that said love is self-giving. Mm-hmm. I thought, uh-oh, because I could just imagine this teenage girl in love with her boyfriend, and she, out of love for him, she's going to give herself to him.
Yes.
Now,
but you see, it's one of the code words for the theology of love. In this document, because there's so much quoted of John Paul II, but it's kind of in snippets and scattered through. If you have read Familiaris Consortia, you've read the Theology of the Body, and a number of other documents that John Paul has written, you understand what's behind these things. And that isn't gone into completely because they wouldn't have time, and it would take a couple of more books to do it. So it's just quoted now and then. And if actually what I would recommend is if you look at the footnote, then you ought to pull out the document and actually read the whole section if you have it.
Now,
but they're easy enough to get.
Brenda, you're a very well-educated woman and very bright, but as far as I know, you're not a theologian, a trained
Correct.
theologian.
Correct.
Did you have difficulty with this document?
Not at all, not at all. And there's a number of other individuals that I have talked to that have read this, and we have all instantaneous, the same reaction: how rich, how beautiful, how simple. Just all those adjectives and so much more.
Do you think a non-Catholic could read it with
Well, it's
benefit?
very funny that you mention that, because I live in a state where there are a lot of non-Catholics and have very good friends, evangelical Christians, and I have started making my list. Who am I going to send this to? Because many times I find that I am on the same wavelength with some of my non-Catholic evangelical friends, sometimes more than some of my other Catholic friends. And I've made my list, and I think I will probably be copying the document for them.
It does match human experience. That's one of the great blessings of John Paul's way of teaching. It is theoretical, and it has all of the theological frameworks that you need and so forth. So it's academic, intellectual, and of course revealed truth. This is the teaching of faith, But it also matches human experience. So if you're living a marriage and you understand what that is from the lived experience, this should resonate with you.
Well, that's one of the problems, though, Father. A lot of
If
the
you're
parents
not,
there are
yeah.
not living this, and I think that is where the exciting opportunity for getting this document out to parents is presented to two different dioceses and parishes. We've lost 25 years worth of people since Humani Vitae that didn't understand what you just told us about the theology of the body, and still might not, and didn't obey that teaching because they didn't understand it.
Now, I'm sorry, but there may be somebody watching who doesn't know what Humani Vitae is.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell simply that have disobeyed the Church's teachings on birth control, on the meaning of love-giving and life-giving and the bond that can't be separated, or you suffer. You
So
suffer
Humani
in your
Vitae
marriage.
was an encyclical written by Paul VI
Right.
in 1968 that explained how the births of children were to be regulated morally,
Exactly.
and said that contraception was not doing it morally.
There's no
It was-
place, because you cannot separate the love-giving and the life-giving powers of the sexual bond without suffering. And we've suffered greatly as a culture by trying to destroy that bond. And then we've seen marriages break up, over and over because they don't have the grace that comes with the holy sex life. And these parents who saw, or even watching this, who may have seen what you just said is almost a foreign language, have not accomplished self-mastery, other-centeredness. They're still using one another for their own sexual pleasure. And so it's mutual pleasuring rather than mutual giving. And I see this document as an opportunity to go out to those suffering. I mean, we can't ignore those. Like, so many pastors will just ignore these people, think, well, they're happy with their contraception, I'm happy with my collection basket, that's okay. But there are couples suffering out there with lust within their marriage. They've suffered from divorce. They've suffered from meaningless, empty sex lives within their own marriages.
And so you're telling us that this document will help them, and this document will help improve their sex lives.
Exactly. This is our chance to re-catechize the suffering parents in the name of their children and help them understand that there's meaning and beauty in the sexual act through the understanding of the theology of the body that Pope John Paul has been trying to reveal to us, and we'll look back and see he was a prophet someday. And we can help these parents because they come in and need help because they can't explain it to their children because they haven't lived it or known it themselves.
Isn't it interesting, though, as God has created us, He's built in the opportunity for self-mastery. For example, Pius XI in his encyclical on marriage called Casta Connubii was the first one who said that it would be morally licit for couples to refrain from having sexual activity when the wife is fertile if for some grave reason they shouldn't be having children at a given time. Now you have built in right away the opportunity for self-mastery, as you say, so that you show your love for the other by mastering yourself and
free ourselves from selfishness and aggressiveness in our own sex life, which seems to be the impetus for a lot of the sex in this culture. And when a person has acquired self-mastery, that comes with an inner peace and ability to give yourself in love rather than to use that other person for what you think is your need for love.
And I think what we're all saying is basically, and I think the document actually says it in so many words, you can't give what you don't have. And really and truly, before parents can give the beautiful, fully flowered picture of this to their children, they really do need to understand these concepts and be living these concepts themselves. And so it's an equal challenge, really.
And that's why going directly to the kids is a problem. You teach these kids these beautiful concepts, and they go home and they start asking their parents questions who don't understand it and can't defend it.
And the parents get mad because it can be put across as an implicit criticism of how they're living their marriage. Because if you bring up, say, for example, contraception, which in a good program that would be brought up at some point at the age-appropriate time, that's going to conflict with the values that the parents have.
Right.
But it's far more basic than, say, contraception or natural family planning. It's the whole attitude, and the document talks about this. Is our sexuality a toy that we can use? You know, we can use toys. We can use
it morally or
you know, if I wanted a fast Mustang, a car, that's a toy. You know, I don't, but if I did, if I had the money, there's nothing wrong with it as long as I drive it safely or reasonably safely. That's a toy. That's a thing. You know, I can do what I want. I can drive fast and experience the thrill of that and whatever. But that's a thing. Now, is our sexuality a thing? If it is, we can use it. We can do what we want with it. It's not love then.
Now
But if it's love, or the means of expressing love,
But that
it's
point's
different.
well taken even in some Catholic programs, Father, because still there are programs that call themselves Catholic that treat sex as a toy, but we're going to put it in the context of morals and say you use this toy morally, rather than expressing. That's not funny. Because
No, you're quite right. It's a good way of putting it.
It's more basic.
We're going to use
It's-
this toy with the moral teachings of the church chapters
Yeah.
around it, rather than expressing the love
it's-
of the person.
It's what the Holy Father has what I mentioned before about the theology of the body, that the body is not a thing, and our sexuality, therefore, is not a thing.
Well, I think a lot of people may be surprised to hear that really, in many ways, the thrust of this document is more toward the teachers than those who are going to be taught. In other words, it's directed more toward the parents again. The concern in some ways maybe is even greater there than what's being passed on, because as you said, Brenda, you can't give what you don't have.
Exactly, and I think that the document, it says, it's repeated over and over and over in just about any way that it can be said, for the parents to come. You know, it's invitational, I think, is another good word for this document. It's not high and lofty, it's invitational, it's user-friendly, it's family-friendly, and it's parent-friendly.
Well, now let's look at it in terms of those parents who are already living the Church's teaching, our Lord's teaching, God's teaching on human sexuality. Their lives are fulfilled. They are having a wonderful marriage. They want to pass this on to their children. And they run up against a brick wall in terms of what's happening in their child's school, maybe even Catholic school.
I have a little story. I was with some parents about a week ago, and they said, we don't want any kind of sex education at all. We're not doing anything, even in our homes. These are Catholic families. So then she went on and said, well, you know, my 7-year-old came to me. I think it was 7. I don't know. The age doesn't make too much difference. This was in the home, and she was pregnant. And so the 7-year-old was asking some questions about the baby and so forth and so on. And as the document said, children of that age are more interested just in the child and when is this coming and that kind of thing. So she told him a couple of things. And she was absolutely astounded when I said to her, "That's sex education. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what this says." She didn't even realize that that's what she was doing, because she had an idea of this that was, number one, school, and secondly, was doing all kinds of things much different
Yeah,
and earlier.
that term has taken on certain meanings because of the way it's generally
I said
been
that's
used.
exactly what you should do.
The parents who are living out this life, they are the primary educators of their children, right? And they have the right to teach their children. And if they're not satisfied with the way the schools are doing it, they have a right, do they not, to insist that it be done properly, in accord with the teachings of the Church.
I asked the Cardinal that when we were there at the Vatican.
Cardinal Trujillo.
Right, it's a grave concern of mine and of many, many parents, because it seems like the one place where the Catholic Church is most discriminatory is against the minority of good Catholic parents who don't like the sex education program in their schools. And they can, and it's not a matter between these parents want it and these parents don't, but the Cardinal said to go to your bishops in dialogue. You don't have to fight this out parish by parish, because the parents are the primary educators, because they have, because they have begotten their children and they have the right, the privilege of educating them. And the Church is a subsidiary to them. In Familia Consortio, the Holy Father says, sex education, which is the basic right and duty of parents, must be held under their attentive guidance, whether at home or in educational centers chosen and controlled by them. In this regard, the Church affirms the law of subsidiarity, which the Church is bound to observe in these matters of sex education. And so they said that the...
End quote.
End quote.
What you just gave us was a word-for-word quote.
Pope John Paul
Our viewers might not have been aware of that.
Right.
It's very impressive. You have it all memorized.
It's my subject.
And that was from his apostolic exhortation on the family that you just quoted to us.
Exactly, the one that Father quoted earlier from 1983. And this gave us some directions on sex education, as well as the educational guidance in human love, which again repeats the same quote. This one repeats the same quote. And so the Church is bound to respect those parents who are in union with the Holy See, and that if a program is offensive to the magisterial teachings, that is shedding the light of Christ on these lives and on the wrong direction we're taking and trying to show us the way, then the Church is bound to observe these parents who are living in obedience to Christ. And so the program is to be removed.
Okay.
We're talking about...
Father, we're going to have to take a break now. And yes, we are. We'll come back after this break.
The St. Charles Forum will return in a moment.
Welcome back to the St. Charles Forum and our discussion of the truth and meaning of human sexuality, a new Vatican document on preparing our children for marriage and family. As the document provides help to parents, it talks about children going through 4 stages, and it says anything we impart to our children should be age appropriate. And one of the reasons it says this should be done in the home is the parents can judge that better than anyone else. What are the 4 stages? Do you remember them?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. We start out with the years of innocence, and that's really 5 years old up until puberty. And then you have puberty, and after that followed by adolescence. And then the stage called towards adulthood, when a parent's work is still not done.
Well, what about the age of innocence, Colleen?
I'm going to quote from the document, because it's so good. Parents want to know this information. First of all, 5 till puberty is different. We know when 5 is, but puberty might be 10 for some girls, and it might be 15 and a half or 16 for some boys. So puberty is an indeterminate time, and that's why individual education is necessary. This period of tranquility and serenity must never be disturbed by unnecessary information about sex. During those years before any physical sexual development is evident, it's normal for the child's interest to turn to other aspects of life. This rudimentary instinctive sexuality of very small children has disappeared. So as not to disturb this important natural phase of growth, parents will recognize that prudent formation and chaste love during this period should be indirect, And they talk about different virtues and things that you should be teaching, and devotion to the Blessed Mother, motherhood, homemaking, taking care of babies, home life. But it says in some societies today there are planned and determined attempts to impose premature sex information on children. But at this stage of development, children are still not capable of fully understanding the value of the affective dimension of sexuality. They cannot understand and control sexual imagery within the proper context of moral principles, and for this reason, they cannot integrate premature sexual information with moral responsibility. Such information tends to shatter their emotional and educational development and to disturb the natural serenity of this period of life. And that's why when they ask the church to help, when the church will help in terms of catechesis, we do study the 6th and 9th commandments, but before children reach adolescence, the document tells us that the information that the church supports us with is not to be direct sexual information. It's to be information about purity and about the commandments, about virtue, about self-control, about grace, and about
Family
the church,
life,
about
motherhood,
forgiveness,
fatherhood.
about confession, about the sacraments, and about all those good things which help form the child so they are prepared for the information that's going to come later.
The difficulty, of course, is that in our society, it's almost impossible to protect kids from this, because even if you get a really solid family with the parents practicing and following the church's teaching, you still have to worry about peer group pressure, knowledge that comes from other people in school, on the block, older brothers and sisters, the media. Even
course,
if you
Father,
turn
don't
off
you
the
think-
TV completely, they're going to find out.
But
It
one of
says
the
that
things...
next.
Yeah, it does say
It
that
does.
next,
It
yeah.
says
Yeah.
they will receive premature sex
Yeah.
information from the media and from their peers, but parents will have to begin to give carefully limited sexual information to correct immoral and erroneous information, but without going into details that might upset or frighten them.
Yeah, in many
So-
respects, they can't, and Colleen, again, reading from the document, it's saying they can't even integrate it. I mean, they may be given some information, okay, but they don't know what it means or don't know what to do with it.
That's why the parents, and then maybe if the parents agree with some help from the church's educational institutions, can give the limited values that go along with the information that they get. The trick would be to give the information that they need. Not information, we're using that to mean just facts, but I'm talking about the values
Right.
or the moral teaching.
Right.
We got the base already because we teach the commandments when they go to first confession. So that's very early.
But
And
I remember talking to one parent who had been involved in, well, actually she was involved in an educational project for children, but she recounted the story with her child just the previous week when the child said, he was 6, and he said, Mommy, where do I come from? And so she was trying to think of some way to explain this to him, simply not to give him too much information, and she was stammering and stuttering. And finally, he said, well, Johnny comes from Minneapolis. Where do I come from?
I just told that story the other day.
Well, and
And parents really, that's why parents really have to also listen to what their children are really asking, because
Yeah.
very often the parent thinks they
Listen,
I
want
think you
something.
raise a good point, because everyone is so geared to the crisis mentality. I see that over and over again, and we have a number of folks that have contacted us that all of a sudden, are worried to death. They think that maybe there should be some programs in their school for the 4th graders or for the 3rd and 4th graders. And once you start digging and asking questions, well, does there seem to be a problem or a lot of questions being asked by most of the class? When you keep digging and keep asking, you end up finding out, well, no, it was maybe one child asking a question, and things
They
just
panic.
spread like wildfire.
And those parents need help, and
Yeah.
that child needs help, and the whole class doesn't have to be offended because one child needs help.
It
And
could
it
be very
gets-
helpful for the teacher to contact the parent and say, this question has come from your child, maybe you should address it.
Right, and again, it just gets back to the idea of, well, integrating this not only into the personality, but into the family, and planning for this, looking towards incorporating this into conversations with children and not saving up for the big talk. Exactly.
Well, we've had the age of innocence, then we get to puberty. All right, and what does the document tell us ought to be done in this stage of the child's? Because here now we do get to the big talk, or
Right.
however it's dealt with.
It'll give specifics right in the document of how parents can gently bring this information to their kids on an individual basis, carefully listen to what they're saying, give more detailed explanations of sexuality, talking about particularly those virtues and values that are going to give meaning to their life, like trust and friendship that you began in earlier parts of life, discussing their cycles of fertility and understanding their fertility, and that'll go into Brenda's program I know you're going to talk about in the beginning, and that's where a father, son, and or a mother and daughter can begin to talk about what that power to give life is all about and how to be responsible about that use of their sexual powers. So maybe we need to talk about those programs.
Well,
because that's
I
where
know
those
too,
come in. A parent and child talking together.
I know the document doesn't use this term, I don't think, teachable moments, but it refers to that reality, you know, and it might be no more than the dog having puppies. I mean, there's so many, or the mother being pregnant. You know,
that's a great teachable moment. I was from a large family of 9. I was near the top, and we had a great sex education. It seemed like my mom was always pregnant all the time, and I remember one of her best sex education lines, and this is, again, great indirect for kids during the age of innocence. My sister asked her, "Mom, what's a honeymoon for?" And she said, "A honeymoon is when you get dressed and undressed in the same bedroom together because you're a new family." Now, this came to me in college when I'm in a car with this boy. He's dropping me off at night, you know, and he's trying to unbutton my shirt. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not supposed to get undressed now. That's for my honeymoon, you know. And, you know, that was a wonderful form of sex education. It was indirect, very, you know, explicit enough that you knew exactly what the rules were. And parents can continue to give little tips and hints that form the child and help them look forward to marriage and family and a positive attitude toward children without having to offend information and also protecting them from what they're getting in the media. And the document will address that too. Protect them from harmful information and gently, in a timely manner, begin to reveal that which will be helpful to them to have a nice family.
By the time we get to adolescence, I mean, most of the rudimentary material formation is there, and it's more a matter of confirming the child, right, in what he has learned and how he's been shaped and formed. And
some other specific issues that generally come up in our culture. You know, homosexuality is an issue, birth control, sterilization, some of those things are addressed. Then it says during adolescence, we bring those things up because our kids are going to be bombarded with those issues again. And they need to be able to defend their faith, not just to know we can't do this or we can't do that, but how to help someone else understand what's good.
Especially the positive aspects of why the church says we shouldn't do this. You know, it's not no, it's yes to love and no to this because it's anti-love, you know.
And I think that the document also mentions at that point in adolescence too, the parent's role being one of also helping that child look towards their vocation, whether they are looking towards marriage and a family, the single life, dedicated religious life, the priesthood. And that's a very, very significant step towards adulthood.
Now, one thing I do want to bring up is the fact that all of you are involved in, how should I put it, in the task of trying to impart God's truth about these matters to adults and children. And I'd just like you to tell us what you're doing with your various programs. You're on this show because, as far as I know, all of your programs are entirely conformable to what is put forth in this document. Colleen was even in the Vatican providing expert advice and helping them develop it. But Brenda, your program's called Family Honor. That seems right away to put it in proper context.
Exactly, and that's a beautiful way to say it. We chose the name very deliberately because we wanted it to reflect the warmth and the core of where all this should be. Very briefly, the mission statement of Family Honor is that we were created to help build healthy families by teaching effective parent-child communication, especially centering on chastity and God's awesome and wonderful gift of fertility. And I think that's a concept that we don't hear too much about, the awesomeness, the wonder of it all. I think in all of our programs that we do, it's a concept that we try and get across to parents and kids.
And you have training sessions for parents, right?
We do.
Or you train teachers?
We train teachers. That's one of the things we are firm believers in. We want people up there, first of all, that share our philosophy, that there's no question nobody is going to get up and be talking about this information unless they share and have a congruent philosophy with us.
And you have them express that?
Oh yes, in written form and verbal form, they have to go through 40 hours of in-class training and then another 100 hours beyond that.
And saying that they agree with
Yeah, and
teaching
pretty
church
much
is teaching.
anybody, the first class that they come to, the first teacher training class, they will know right then and there. If somehow they came and weren't clear before then, they understand at that point what we're about. And as we say on a regular basis, we are not confused about what we're doing. I don't think you can be confused and put across these principles. And then in turn, we take those teachers and we do our programs in teaching teams. We don't just have one individual go out and do a program. We try and at the same time entertain the kids and educate the parents, and somehow it all comes together on all these core values.
Thank you. And Father, you're involved with something called Project Genesis.
Yes, this is a parent-driven
And you have about a minute.
Okay, chastity education program that can be used by parishes. It's definitively Catholic. It's based on theology or religion, the moral base we've been talking about, on health and on relationships. It has K through 8 teacher manuals and student texts. It has workshops for a CCD program, and there's a parent book and a child's book to be used at home. So it's a complete program, and it can be used in all kinds of different ways by parishes, and it's one of those, we think it's totally in conformity with the document, although it was started beforehand.
And Colleen, and you're one of the first to have a parent component.
Right.
You have about a minute.
And it did come out before the document. I already, from Educational Guidance in Human Love, had defined those guidelines as well as I could, and could see that the education must come through and with the parent. So we have a parent's guide for the Love and Life program, as well as a student workbook. I had already recommended when I wrote it that those intimate details be taught at home, the information on test tube babies, masturbation, homosexuality, all that's in the parent's guide, as well as the more serious biological information, so that that is done at home. And the motivation to live chastity can be taught in the classroom or, in a home situation with a parent and child. They have mutual quizzes to write together. They talk about dating, and they can do this in the privacy of their home or have the classroom workbook with the parent accompaniment. So it's still, before this document was written, was in conformity with it.
And it's been wonderfully successful, too.
Right. It's exciting to see that the program has been well received by many good Catholics, and it is in conformity with the church teachings.
Well, thank you very much. It's been wonderful having you here. We ask God's blessing on your work. You're doing great work. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the St. Charles Forum.